community and with jobs and all that kind of stuff. And so we just started going, and then here I was like, oh, I gotta run downstairs.
Wow. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the City of Muskegon Planning Commission. We'd like to welcome all you in our listening audience, and be sure that if you want to call in on anything, that there's a phone number listed at the bottom of your screen. You can call us in on. We got a really short meeting today. We don't have any public hearings. Oh yeah, we had 2 public hearings. We have a short meeting. We have 2 public hearings, and the way a public hearing works is that I will announce the hearing. Staff will explain what the hearing is about. Commissioners will have an opportunity to ask questions of staff, and this is a staff-initiated request. So then I'll open it up to anyone in the audience that wants to call in to speak to the subject, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so roll call.
Ken Johnson. Eric Hood.
Here.
Jonathan Seifert.
Here.
Destiny Keener. Joe Doyle.
Here.
Brian Mazade. Jill Montgomery Keast.
Here.
Larry Spataro.
Here.
Tim Mikulski.
Here. Okay, next is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of June 15th. And do we have any minutes from the special meeting?
Not
We
yet.
don't have those
Okay,
right yet.
we'll get that.
I'll
We'll get that the
motion,
next meeting.
I'll motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of June 15th, 2023.
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Old business. Do we have any old business to come before this committee? Next, we go to public hearings. Hearing case 2023-15.
This is a staff-initiated request to amend section 2333 of the zoning ordinance to modify the requirements on fencing. The amendments really are to help specify which type of fences are allowed and not allowed. We really haven't had too much of a problem with the courts yet on enforcement, but we're starting to see some really odd fencing going up here and there with some makeshift fencing, and we believe identifying what specifically types of fences are allowed will help us whenever we need to enforce on those. So that's really what this initiative is about. Instead of saying solid board fencing, we say wood or vinyl, stockade fencing. Also identifying not just the chain link and the picket, but the split rail and the wrought iron. Also, maybe one of the more important things we're requesting to not allow is when you see those metal slats in between the chain link fencing, those do almost nothing to actually screen things, and then within a year or two they're already starting to fall apart. So we've seen that as a problem from some properties.
You just gotta drive down the street and look at the Frontier.
Yeah. The Frontier building is a good example of that. That one, at least, it's not falling apart so bad, but a lot of the times when people have an existing chain link fence and they put those slats in when they were not designed that way, it's almost instantly a blight issue.
Okay. Any further discussion? Commissioners? Is there anybody in our home audience that wishes to speak to this subject?
There's no call.
Getting no calls? Yes,
I
Commissioner?
would move that we close the public hearing.
Support?
Moved and supported to close the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Okay, public hearing is closed. What's your pleasure, Commissioners?
I'll go. I would move that the request to amend section 2333 of the zoning ordinance to modify the requirements on fencing be recommended to the city commission for approval as proposed. Support.
Been moved and supported. Is there any discussion on the matter? Seeing none, roll call please.
Eric Hood.
Yes.
Jonathan Seifert.
Yes.
Joe Doyle.
Yes.
Jill Montgomery Keast.
Yes.
Larry Spataro.
Yes.
Tim Mikulski.
Yes. Motion passes. And then we go to Hearing case 2023-16. Another staff-initiated request.
It's a staff-initiated request to amend section 2319 of the zoning ordinance to modify the residential design criteria. Many of these amendments are just elimination of things that are already in the building codes. They were in here a long time ago. I'm not really sure why the department at the time felt the need to have that in there along with the building codes, but since those change from time to time, and since this is a document we often give the developers to let them know what they have to meet in terms of what it looks like, it's a lot easier just to take these things out of there for redundancy. We also clarified between an actual building and a unit, which was sometimes incorrectly placed throughout the document. A couple of the bigger things we're proposing is to eliminate the 15% storage space requirement. Recent amendments to this section included the requirement for either a shed or a garage on every property, so storage shouldn't be too much of an issue. We also have existing codes that prohibit outdoor storage, and storage needs vary by family, and requiring more storage than needed can add additional costs to the housing. When we get a plan in from time, we're always looking at the storage, but it seems a little odd when we're measuring the closet space in the bedrooms and the hallways just to make sure there's a certain percentage when it may not even be relevant to that specific family. So in terms of keeping housing costs down, we would recommend removing that requirement as well, especially since we've added the requirement of storage space for a garage or a shed. The other thing we're recommending is to eliminate the minimum width of a house on a lot under 40 feet. And because right now the ordinance states, I believe, anything under 35 feet has to have a width of at least 20 feet. Sometimes that can cause issues with some of our more narrow lots when they're meeting that 5-foot minimum side setback and they have an eave. If they're only on a 30-foot wide lot, they're not even going to be able to meet that requirement. So we are working with some developers right now that are proposing some 15-foot wide homes, and those are going on 30 to 33-foot wide lots. And the reason we picked 40 is just to give it a little bit more leeway, because that's what falls in line with our R2 districts, which require a 40-foot minimum lot width. So anything above that, I think it would start looking a little odd if you had a very narrow house on something that could hold a duplex. So we're hoping to keep that minimum on anything over 40 feet, but not anything under that as well. We did have one comment from the public. Jamie Cross sent in a comment. She seems supportive of this, but she didn't really understand why she would be able to split off a lot next to her and build another house, but she would not be able to turn her single family home into a duplex. Pretty good question. Something that's been heavily debated for decades here. It was done a lot in the 70s and 80s when some of these houses were split up. Left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths because there weren't many regulations. They were getting too many units on very narrow, 33-foot wide lots. We believe our form-based code addresses many of those things that people didn't really agree with when that happened. So that led to a lot of the downzoning efforts in the late 90s and early 2000s, and that's where we're at today. So that's not being proposed to change anything in here, but she did notice that it was already in there. So perhaps it's it's a good time to bring that up for discussion, especially with the housing needs assessment. But there certainly are other drawbacks to splicing up a single family home into possibly a duplex that we'd have to consider.
Yes, Commissioner.
If it's time for comments. Just a couple things. One, I was here for some of those changes that we're undoing here, and most of them I don't have any issue with. But one thing we did do back in the early 2000s because it was a safety issue, and the state code at that time had a much less stringent requirement, and that was the snow load requirements for roofs. And we took that action based on our own building inspector's recommendations, and also because, you know, most of the state doesn't have our snow load, period. And at that particular winter, which I think was 2001 or 2002, there were a number of roof collapses in the West Michigan area, and some of them resulting in pretty serious injuries or death. And so that's why we changed that. But if the state code now allows us the flexibility to do that, because we also had a lot of folks who were bringing in double wides, which the maximum slow load was like 20 pounds per foot or whatever. And so that was a concern. It was a safety issue that was not addressed in the state codes. And I know those get changed. I mean, you know, we don't need 4-foot deep footings in sand like they do if you're in clay. But, you know, I don't know what I haven't had a chance to look up what the current state building codes say in regard to the strength of a roof. That also came into play with the slope requirements, so that people weren't getting ice dams and stuff and damage to their house because of the roof slope.
Yeah, they do have that snow and wind load requirement in there now that actually comes into play a lot when people are trying to put in those carports that are prefab at Menards. They don't meet that, so
Right.
usually we have to tell people if you want a carport that is allowed, but it's gonna have to be stick built and meet those requirements.
Okay. But that was just, you know, I'm not opposed to these changes, it's just saying that's how some of that stuff ended
Yeah.
up in there, because at the time, the state codes didn't cover it.
That makes sense.
So,
It's good to know.
just
Yes,
to,
Commissioner?
just to clarify, Mike, the state code is at 40% or
40 pounds per square foot, I
foot?
believe.
I don't know exactly what the requirement is, but I
But they
know
do
that
have
they
a-
have a standard.
There is a standard.
There
in
is a
the state
standard,
code.
yes.
Okay, all right, as long as it's someplace.
We don't have bad winters anymore.
Right, there's global
warming.
warming.
Yeah.
It's not like we,
Okay, is there any further discussion?
a lot of rain.
Is there anybody in our listening audience that wishes to comment on this item?
Doesn't look like it.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second?
Getting ahead of me. Been moved to close the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, motion passes. New business. Is there any new business to come before
No,
this?
that, we still have to vote on the
Oh,
ordinance change.
trying to get out of here, I guess.
It's nice outside.
I'll
Okay.
read it.
Commissioner?
I move that the request to amend section 2333 of the zoning ordinance to modify the requirements on fencing be recommended to the city commission for approval as proposed.
That's the last one. We need the next one.
I'm gonna have to.
Why don't you do it, Larry?
No, wait, no, that was,
Yeah, print a copy.
No, this is the other stuff. The fence was the one we
Okay,
just
I'll get
did.
what's the same thing?
Oh, I think I may have
Is there a typo?
messed that up.
Yeah, there's a typo.
Yeah,
Hold
that's-
on, this
That's
is-
why I don't.
Mike, could you
kinda
tell us
like
what the motion ought to be?
The motion should be
Section 2,
2319.
yeah, 2319. Okay, try again. I move that the request to amend section 2319 of the zoning ordinance to modify the requirements on fencing
Residential
On-
design criteria.
on design criteria be recommended to the city commission for approval as proposed.
Support.
Jeez.
Been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, excuse me, roll call.
Jonathan Seifert,
Yes.
Destiny Keener. Yes. Joe Doyle,
Yes.
Jill Montgomery Keith,
Yes.
Larry Spataro,
Yes.
Eric Hood,
Yes.
Tim Mikulski.
Yes. Okay. Any updates on previous cases?
Adelaide Point, the amendment, the minor amendment to the PUD was approved by the planning commission at the special meeting on Tuesday. That included changing one of the condo buildings to a hotel, eliminating another condo building, and a slight modification to Adelaide Circle.
Okay.
The streets will be two-way again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Anything else? Seeing nothing, we are adjourned.
Awesome.
See?
Yeah, nice and fast.
Clear.